Years ago, my life was changed forever, and not by choice. I was 24, just beginning to crawl out from under the crushing grief of losing my mother, who had fought, if you can call it that, a brutal and losing war with breast cancer. My grandmothers, both of them, had also been claimed by the same disease. It was a legacy I never asked for, but couldn't ignore. So when my doctor recommended screening, I didn't hesitate. I remember vividly the sterile scent of the clinic, the cold hush of the waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, making every detail of that day uncomfortably sharp. I sat there, hands fidgeting with the hem of my sleeve, my mind busy with all the what-ifs. The doctor's words, when they came, seemed almost scripted: you have some abnormal cells. They could turn cancerous at any moment. With your family history, the risk is very high. My world dropped out from under me. I was 24. I sat there, silent, numb, listening as the specialist walked me through my options. They were all bad in different ways. I could gamble with regular screenings, hoping nothing would turn up, but waiting for cancer to find me. Or I could submit to surgery, a single mastectomy, or, the nuclear option, remove all my breast tissue, a bilateral mastectomy, which would eliminate the risk almost completely. Surgery. Scars. Loss. I thought of my mother, of the pain she endured, of her body failing her again and again. I thought of her hands, trembling as she brushed my hair when I was small. I thought of my grandmother's, how cancer had hollowed out my family tree. I saw my future mapped out in those genetic lines, and I decided, I wasn't going to take the chance. So I told the doctor yes. The most drastic option. Take it all. Remove the tissue. Remove the risk. They warned me about the scarring. Should be fairly minor, they said. But life has a way of ignoring best-case scenarios, and when the bandages finally came off, I was left staring at two angry, jagged slashes across my chest. Each one an inch long, half an inch wide, shining pink and raw. I stood there in front of the mirror, blinking at the reality, but nothing could soften it. My reflection had become a stranger. The scars were more than skin deep. They etched themselves into my sense of self, into every glance at my reflection, every outfit I tried on. I spiraled. I stopped leaving my flat, curtains drawn against the world. I tossed every mirror. Food lost its taste. I felt sick when I accidentally brushed my fingertips over the raised lines, a constant, physical reminder of what cancer, and fear, had taken from me. It got worse before it got better. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling for hours, feeling like a fraud in my own body. I was supposed to feel grateful, to call myself a survivor. But I only felt broken. Therapy was a lifeline, suggested by a friend who caught me in one of my rare moments out of the house. My therapist was kind, gentle in her approach, but honest. She listened to me sob, to my shame, to the way I couldn't bear to see my own chest. She told me it was okay to grieve, to hate what had happened, but she also said that sometimes, people need help to put the pieces back together. She recommended I see a plastic surgeon, not her usual protocol, she admitted, but the scars were keeping me from living. Even then, I hesitated. Would I ever feel whole, or was I just chasing a ghost? The surgeon offered options: a cream, which did nothing. Laser treatments, which were out of reach financially and came with their own risks. And, finally, implants. A way to restore shape, to hide the scars, to give me back some sense of normalcy. I'd lost more than my breasts, I'd lost my confidence, my identity as a woman. So I agreed. I chose a size a bit smaller than what I'd had before, DD cups instead of my natural F. The surgery was nothing compared to the mastectomy, and when the bandages came off this time, I wept for a different reason. The scars were hidden, smoothed by the implants. For the first time in years, I saw something in the mirror that wasn't just loss. My spirit started to return. I found myself smiling more, standing up straighter. I know people say that beauty is only skin deep, but it's easy to say that when you've never been cut open, when you haven't watched your body betray you. For me, hiding those scars was a way back to myself. Years passed. I rebuilt my life with slow, steady effort. New routines, new friends, a new apartment. Therapy, journaling, long walks in parks. By 28, I had landed a steady job at an office in the city, a glass-fronted building that buzzed with the energy of too many computers and the caffeinated chatter of coworkers. I liked my job. It was ordinary, which was exactly what I wanted. I liked the routine, the gentle rhythm of emails, meetings, and paperwork. I kept my past close to the chest, a secret stitched beneath my skin, not because I was ashamed, but because it was mine. Jill, however, was not someone who respected boundaries. She was the sort of person who thrived on office gossip, always in the thick of every rumor, a gleam in her eye when she sensed a secret. I mostly ignored her, but fate has a way of drawing people like us into orbit. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. I was chatting with an old friend, one who'd known me before any of this, about a holiday we were planning. She made a teasing joke about flying with my implants, a reference to a silly myth about breast implants and airplane cabins. I laughed, but Jill was passing by and caught the exchange. Her eyes narrowed, lips curling into a smirk. By the end of the day, the entire floor seemed to know I'd had a boob job. Whispers followed me in the hallway. I caught curious glances in the break room, subtle and not so subtle. It wasn't paranoia, half a dozen people confirmed that Jill was the one spreading it around. I tried to shrug it off. People gossip. It's what they do. But for Jill, it wasn't enough to simply share the news. Over the next 3 months, she made my chest her favorite topic. It started as jokes, snide comments, always within earshot, never directly to my face. "You've got more plastic than Barbie," she said one afternoon, while giggling with her friends by the copy machine. Another time, she remarked, fake in 2 ways, her gaze lingering pointedly at my chest, her tone laced with venom. I didn't hear every insult directly, but my friends in the office would give me a quiet heads up. Jill called me a sack of silicone to someone at lunch, they said, or made snide remarks about how I must have gotten it paid for by the NHS, as if I'd gamed the system for free cosmetic surgery. The ignorance stung nearly as much as the malice. I tried, more than once, to ask her to stop. I waited until we were alone, in the lift, or the women's bathroom, hoping she'd drop the act away from an audience. Each time, I spoke quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jill, I'd appreciate it if you didn't talk about me like that. It's making me uncomfortable." She'd just smile, all teeth, and say, "Just having a laugh, love. Don't be so sensitive." But she didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. It wasn't daily, but I could count on at least 3 barbed comments a week, sometimes more. My anxiety crept back in. I found myself dreading the office, scanning every room for Jill before I entered. The breaking point came on a Thursday, during lunch in the break room. There were 6 of us around the table, eating and chatting about weekend plans. I made a throwaway comment about something being shallow, maybe a song on the radio, maybe the weather, I honestly can't remember. What I do remember is Jill, loud enough for everyone to hear, saying, "You'd know all about being shallow," her hand gesturing, almost theatrically, toward my chest. Time seemed to freeze. The room went quiet, forks paused mid-air. Heat rose in my cheeks, my heart thudding in my chest. I felt a fury I hadn't felt since those cold, dark days after surgery. I set my fork down and looked Jill dead in the eye. My voice was shaking, but clear. "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago, doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy, lost both breasts, and was left with huge, ugly scars. I went to see a therapist, because I couldn't even look in the mirror without crying. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon, who told me implants were the only way to hide the scars. I did what I had to do so I could see myself and not break down. So maybe, next time you want to judge someone for cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first. I stood, picked up my tray, hands trembling, and left the room. As I walked down the corridor, the silence of the break room echoed in my ears, each step heavy with adrenaline and shame. I found an empty conference room and sat there, steadying my breathing, blinking back tears. For the rest of the day, my colleagues were divided. About a third approached me quietly, offering support, a hand on the shoulder, a whispered, "Good for you." The others kept their distance, muttering that Jill was just joking, that I was overreacting. I wanted to scream. Jill was being a bitch long before I snapped. I replied to one of them, tired of playing nice. But the real blow came after lunch, when an email landed in my inbox, starkly formal. HR would like to meet with you tomorrow regarding allegations of creating a hostile work environment. My stomach dropped. I called HR for clarification. Debbie, the HR rep, picked up. Her tone was clipped, almost rehearsed. "Yes, we've received a complaint. We'll discuss it when you come in." I knew Debbie was close to Jill, everyone did. Panic clawed at my ribs. If she was handling my case, I was already at a disadvantage. That night, I barely slept. I cycled through every memory of the last 3 months, every insult, every time I'd asked Jill to stop. I remembered something in my employment contract about complaints, something about requesting an impartial reviewer if you believed your HR rep was biased. I rummaged through my old paperwork, hands shaking, and found it. In the event of a conflict of interest, the employee may request an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted the relevant section. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. My hands were clammy as I messaged everyone who'd offered support the day before. HR's asked to see me. If you remember Jill insulting me, would you be willing to write and sign a statement about what you heard? Some hesitated. Jill was feared for her connections, but about 20 people agreed. By the time HR called me in, I had 16 statements, all printed and signed, some with bullet points cataloging every nasty thing Jill had said, not just to me, but about others as well. Comments about a coworker's weight, something anti-Semitic about another's nose, the list went on. I organized everything in a folder, along with my contract copy and a list of dates and witnesses. At 10 a.m. sharp, I walked into HR, clutching my folder like a shield. Debbie was waiting, lips pressed in a thin line, ready to lead me into the meeting room. I paused, turning to the other HR rep in the room, Sarah, a quiet presence but known for her fairness. "Am I meeting with you, then?" I asked. Debbie bristled. "No, you're with me." I shook my head, pulling out my contract. "As per my contract, I'd like to request an impartial overseer. I have concerns about Debbie's impartiality, given her personal relationship with Jill." Debbie's jaw clenched. "I can be impartial." I held her gaze. "With respect, I don't feel comfortable with you overseeing this case." She stomped off to fetch her supervisor. When he arrived, he asked for details. I told him Jill and Debbie were close, and I was exercising my contractual right. He sighed, nodded, and asked Sarah to join us. The 4 of us, the supervisor, Sarah, Debbie, and myself, filed into the meeting room. Debbie looked murderous. The interview began. It lasted over half an hour, with questions cycling around, each time phrased differently, trying to trip me up. "Why do you think Jill reported you?" Sarah asked. "She's had an issue with me for 3 months now," I replied, voice steady. "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" "I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought if I asked her to stop, she would." "What issue does she have with you?" I explained, in detail, about my medical history, the mastectomy, the scars, the implants. I offered permission for HR to review my medical file. I laid out how Jill had found out about my implants, but never knew the reason behind them, and how she turned it into office gossip. "Why do you feel this is true?" Debbie asked, her voice clipped. I pulled out the stack of signed statements. Here are 16 accounts from coworkers, detailing the things Jill said to them, about me, about others, over the past 3 months. The dates are approximate, but the events are real. They sifted through the statements, frowning. What led to this complaint against you? Sarah pressed. I explained the lunchroom confrontation, specifying who was present and pointing out that there were cameras in the room to verify what transpired. I also gave a list of the times I'd asked Jill to stop, as best as I could recall. And to your knowledge, did Jill ever know about your cancer risk? The supervisor asked. No. I never told her. It's not her business, and I shouldn't have to share my medical history to avoid harassment. The supervisor stood. Thank you. That will be all for now. We'll review the evidence and get back to you. I returned to my desk, hands shaking, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. I opened a blank document, my CV, just in case. I'd worked too hard to lose everything to someone else's cruelty. The day dragged on. Around lunchtime, I noticed the colleague who'd witnessed the lunchroom incident being called into HR. 10 minutes later, she returned, looking relieved. Then, one by one, the other witnesses were called, then the people who'd written statements. Each time, they returned, some pale, some angry, some supportive. Finally, Jill's turn came. She disappeared into HR for half an hour, returning red-faced, her mouth a thin, angry slash. She glared daggers at me as I typed away at my desk, but I refused to meet her gaze. Around 4:30, she was summoned again. This time, she returned with a box of her belongings, flanked by a stony-faced supervisor. She stomped to her desk, slamming drawers, muttering under her breath about how I'd got her fired. Some people avoided her, others looked relieved. She shoved her way onto the lift, and the heavy silence she left behind felt like a cleansing wind. A few minutes later, an email from HR pinged into my inbox. Case closed. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I'd been holding for 3 months. The scars on my chest still existed, but for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not for what was taken from me, but for what I'd survived. And, finally, for what I refused to tolerate. I sat there for a moment, surrounded by the ordinary buzz of the office, the clack of keyboards, the hum of printers. Life moved on around me, but inside, I felt a quiet triumph. I hadn't wanted a battle, but if one came to me, I wasn't going to back down. There's a power in reclaiming your story, in refusing to let someone else's cruelty rewrite your narrative. My scars, hidden or not, are a part of me. But so is the strength it took to stand up, to draw my line, to say, enough. Jill never saw it coming. She thought she could humiliate me, but in the end, she was undone by her own pettiness, exposed by the very people she sought to entertain. I don't know what Jill will do now, or whether she learned anything. But as I closed my laptop that evening, gathering my things to go home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The office wasn't just a place to work anymore, it was a place where, finally, I'd stood my ground. And I wasn't going anywhere.